Ronnie, unique big brother. You know around the way everybody avoid and steer clear of because he's so wild and up.
Well. Look who's home.
In Raising Kanan this season, there was a lot of chess moves being played. There was a lot of unknowns, mysteries, and questions, especially when it came to one character in particular, Ronnie Mathis. From the moment he was introduced, we knew he was going to be trouble. All these characters allow us to build out the world and to explore different pieces of that world, the dimensions, tensions, and new conflicts. And when you have great actors, you can take big swings. Grantham Coleman, who plays Unique's brother, is a real and dangerous presence. Those were some words on Ronnie's role from Sasha Penn, who's a showrunner for Raising Kanan, and he was spot on. Ronnie may have been a man of a few words, but his presence was certainly felt in more ways than one. And very rarely do we come across a character who makes that level of impact without saying much. He was dangerous, feared, awkward, and a psychopath to name a few, and it all added to his persona, which earned him the nickname Ronnie Myers. Michael Myers was a little bit of the movement and inspiration for sure. That's a weird walk, and I had to have it. And he certainly was very weird and very awkward. Now, despite his awkwardness, brute strength, and ruthlessness, he also had a few flaws, which eventually contributed towards his downfall. So in this breakdown, we're going to look at Ronnie's character in a bit more detail. We're going to break down his mindset, his relationship with Unique and Kanan, this hatred that he had for Rock, and a few parallels back to OG Power, and how it all contributed towards his downfall. But also why I do feel there was a bit of a missed opportunity with his character in Raising Kanan Season 3.
You see, Ronnie's upstate for the rest of his natural life. And I'm running the show right now, so I do what I want to do.
Now, Ronnie was a character that was mentioned as early as Season 1, Episode 1, in a conversation between Unique and Rock. Even though he was said to be spending the rest of his life upstate, ever since he was mentioned, it was just a waiting game until we saw him on our screens. And on a side note, the same also goes for D-Wiz's brother, who was also mentioned very early on, another character who we should keep our eyes peeled for. But the early questions around Ronnie were, how would they introduce him? What impact would he have on Unique and the wider chessboard? And how was he exactly going to be released from prison? We know from the history of power, if there's a will, there is a way. Whether it be a technicality, dirty prosecution teams hiding evidence, or dirty law enforcement officers trying to manufacture evidence, if it served the purpose of the storyline and the characters on Raising Kanan, they would find a way. We've all seen what happens when you put two strong-minded brothers together. You know it's going to provide plenty of tension, drama, and fireworks. We've seen it before with Ghost and Tommy. On Power Book 2 Ghost, we've seen it with Drew and Kane, as well as Tariq and Braden. On Force, we've seen it with Diamond and Janard. Excited to show brothers who are definitely on the same side, but problems can come up when you involve business with family, and especially when you deal with someone who is built like Ronnie is, which is just not somebody who's willing to listen to anyone other than what he thinks. Now, the way in which the writers did decide to bring Ronnie into the fold was by following the real-life story of Louis Scarcella. Once dubbed as Brooklyn's baddest cop, Scarcella was a dirty NYPD detective who manufactured evidence which resulted in dozens of people being convicted of crimes that they may or may not have committed in the late 80s and 90s. This resulted in a lot of his cases being overturned and freeing many who spent years behind bars.
As more wrongfully imprisoned men are released this week. As you may remember, Detective Sacristano was found guilty of manufacturing evidence against at least 10 men.
So introducing Ronnie Mathis, the guy around the way that everybody avoids because he's so wild and fucked up. Instantly we knew Ronnie wasn't just different to Unique, he was different altogether. Now, Unique is a character who's equally as tough and strategic, but he can also be charismatic, charming, he has a way with words, and you can also say he can pull on the heartstrings. Although after what happened between Ronnie and Unique later in the story, I'm not too sure he'll be back as the same Unique we once knew, but we will get there later on in this breakdown. But Ronnie, he certainly was built different. Now, was he always this way? We can't always be 100% sure. Sometimes prison does change a man, and it is worth noting, he did spend 3 years inside.
That's the very reason why your socially maladjusted ass is here asking for counsel.
Snaps called him socially maladjusted, which is a term used in psychology and sociology, which describes people who struggle to adapt, engage, or behave appropriately in social situations. And based on what we saw from Ronnie, through various conversations to the way he behaved in the club, to Pop giving him a hug, he didn't like people getting too close to him. He didn't exactly engage in conversations like any normal person would do. He didn't like people invading his space, which also probably stems from his time in prison, because he was most likely used to his own space. Although on Pop running her hands down Ronnie's body, there was a reason why she did so. It was an old school move to check whether Ronnie was actually wearing a wire. But Ronnie, he was always set in his ways. He liked things how they were supposed to be. He was always tidying up and putting things back in his place, showing he was old school and that he also had OCD. So instantly Unique and Panessa knew that he was going to be a problem, and she never really felt comfortable having him around.
Jerome went downstairs last night to get a glass of water, and Ronnie was just sitting there on the couch in the dark staring at the TV.
Unique definitely had a lot of love for his brother, but it doesn't mean that he was happy to see him free and back home. Very similar to Jannard and Diamond, he was happy to see his big brother when he was released, but did he have an ulterior motive when he bought in the barber shop? Was he trying to keep his brother out the way so he could continue running the operation his way? Brothers always fight, clash, have different ideologies. It is normal, especially when you are the complete opposites. So Unique knew the trouble that came with someone as impatient as Ronnie. There's this interesting work-home life balance that's going on with Ronnie being back in the picture. I think Unique is excited until he learns that his big brother is not proud of what he's done with the operation, and he can't seem to register that times have changed, and Unique has done the best he could. So I think while dealing with that pressure, and also trying to get back on top of his game, Unique has a lot on his plate. Now the operation that Ronnie left Unique had been completely destroyed by Rock, and we soon learned that Ronnie was all about that work. He's a man of business, he was very shallow and had very limited responses, and the fact that he was able to make such an impact that he did without saying too much is a testament to the writers as well as Grantham Coleman who played Ronnie.
Sleeve. Scratched my hand on the car door early. You stay bullshitting.
Now he could smell his brother's bullshit from a mile away, and you could tell from very early on there was tension brewing between the two brothers because he knew Unique lied to him about the blood on his sleeve, and also because they had no work. Ronnie Mathis was the head of the operation before he was locked away for 3 years. This forced him to hand over the keys to his kingdom to his younger brother Unique. However, a battle with Rock over the course of seasons 1 and 2 didn't just result in him losing everything that Ronnie left him, but he also found himself falling for Rock, someone who Ronnie had a very deep hatred for.
Fuck Rock.
Now, this hatred that he had for Rock and the way he was around women made many question if Ronnie was hiding some dark secrets. For example, was he into men? And could he have even been in an undercover relationship with Defcon? Hence this hatred for Rock, because it was a well-known fact that Defcon was also into men back in the day, and he used to use Rock as cover. But I personally don't believe that to be the case, and we were never really given any solid evidence to back that theory up with either. I always say we have to go on the evidence, facts and findings, which is why I was also never on board with Ronnie being Breeze. Many also questioned whether he was Breeze because of his demeanor, the way he carried himself, the way he behaved, how he was seen and heard watching TV, because Breeze was said to be someone who loved watching Jeopardy. He also later became a mentor to Kanan in a very similar fashion to how the older Kanan became a mentor to Tariq St. Patrick, but it was never going to be the case, mainly because Grantham Coleman was casted as a lead role in another TV series, which was the moment where I knew time was ticking for his character. Now Ronnie was focused on one thing and one thing only, getting his empire back from the one person that he believed stole it all, Rock. Very similar to how Kanan tried to get his empire back from Ghost when he was released from prison later on in Power, which isn't the only parallel. There are a few others which I am going to touch on later on. But Ronnie was very much focused on work, and he also relied heavily on his persona of being feared in the streets.
Feared.
Any disrespect, insult, or anyone speaking out of line, Ronnie dealt with them in ruthless fashion. He was creepy, unpredictable, and a little reckless. He was all over Queens causing chaos, and very early on he made the characters on Raising Kanan feel very uneasy and uncomfortable. The way he questioned his brother around Rock, knowing that things had changed between them since he was inside, was very calculated. He was always steady plotting and scheming, all while remaining in the shadows when he wanted to remain hidden, but also revealing himself when he wanted to be seen.
Nick's plans being made by his dick. Fucking the competition.
Who's your brother fine-ass smashing?
Rock.
Ronnie followed Unique because he knew something just didn't quite add up, and when he saw that he was sleeping with the enemy, his patience began to wear thin. He made a move to get his operation back up and running the way he wants so he could call the shots. So he approached a couple of old business partners in Snaps and Pop. Snaps and Pop and Ronnie go all the way back because it was said that Ronnie made them a lot of money back in the day. However, it was also here where we saw Ronnie being a bit of a hypocrite. Ronnie really didn't like people talking about his business or shit that weren't theirs to talk about, and we saw how he dispatched Dean for doing the same. But he had no problem in talking shit about his very own brother, revealing that he was in bed with Rock, information that can be very valuable in the streets. Now Snaps and Pop did agree to invest in Ronnie's enterprise, however it was up to him to find the rest. On the other hand, with his brother Unique, He was really irritated that he was offered this Chinese restaurant as a way to give his brother some work.
You're always focused on the wrong thing, Nick. Rock took all we had and left you with this bullshit.
Unfortunately, Ronnie saw this as disrespect. He left Unique with the entire organization, with Dean as the connect, and since he's been out, Unique was in Rock's bed and he had no real organization, because let's be real, the Chinese restaurant wasn't exactly bringing in cash. We did learn later on from Quan that Unique was finding it difficult to get the transportation issue sorted. With the added presence of law enforcement, Unique's business was a bit slow. However, Ronnie blamed the one person, Rock, and look, let's be fair to Ronnie, he wasn't wrong enough pointing the finger in Rock's direction, because she was the one who ultimately destroyed Unique's operation in seasons 1 and 2. But Ronnie saw Unique offering him this spot as outright disrespect, and so cue Ronnie stirring up water to catch a fish.
Probably our fucking Rock.
What? What the fuck are you talking about?
At no point in season 3 was Unique able to eat a sandwich in peace, because Ronnie was making his life hell at home. Although let's not get it twisted, Unique is no saint by cheating on Panessa, but Ronnie talking about his brother's business and telling his partner he was sleeping with Rock, that was some pretty bitch shit if I'm gonna be totally honest. On one hand, he was dealing with characters like Dean for talking shit about his business, and on the other hand, he was out here talking shit about his brother, so definitely a bit of a hypocrite if you ask me. Now, what followed was a battle between two brothers that had been brewing from the start. Even though Ronnie was adamant that his brother Unique was going nowhere when he approached Juliana for work. But this fight ended up with Unique coming out as the big dog. He put his older brother on the floor and beat him in a good old-fashioned fist fight. But often what happens when one ego is bruised, they play dirty. So we saw him sucker punch Unique from behind. He continued to beat him and then kicked him down a ditch. Now, with Unique no longer in the picture, or at least until episode 10, Ronnie got the ball rolling by making a deal with Juliana behind Joaquin's back, as well as bringing the young Kanan on board. He introduced him to some big players in New York, where the writers continued to portray real-life events. But this is where I do feel like his character did become a little stale, and where I think they missed some opportunities with Ronnie. He did take Kanan under his wing like many of us wanted to see, and like many of us predicted he would. He also helped him out with a couple of situations by using tactics of fear and intimidation, and no doubt, the older Kanan did take a few traits from Ronnie. The older Kanan was ruthless and used similar tactics, and often leading by making sure he was also feared. However, I really do feel like we could have seen and heard more conversation between Ronnie and Kanan, with him poisoning his mind just like the older Kanan did with the young Tariq St. Patrick. We did learn that he did tell Kanan that Rock was the one who got rid of Unique, but I feel like from episode 6 to episode 10, they definitely could have given us a bit more dialogue between the two, or both of them terrorizing the streets with Ronnie teaching Kanan a thing or two, just like Kanan did with Tariq. So I do feel there was a bit of a missed opportunity, which is a bit of a theme in the Power universe, the last one being Mecca in Book 2 Ghost, but that's just my opinion. So having said that, Rock made sure that Ronnie and Kanan's business wasn't open for long. We saw her making moves by approaching Joaquin, by telling him that Juliana made a deal behind his back to supply Ronnie, so with his blessings, we saw Rock getting her leather gloves back on.
Your business relationship and any other kind of relationship you may have had with her is done.
So Ronnie was now out of business, and Joaquin could have ended him right here, which he had every right to because he went behind his back to make a deal with Juliana, and also because Joaquin does have a deal with the Italian Vietnamese family that he wouldn't sell heroin on Southside Jamaica Queens. He also made a deal with Snaps and Pop not to get rid of Ronnie, because if he did, that also meant Snaps and Pop would also lose their investment.
This old Rock.
So we saw his obsession with Rock continue, and to be fair, he was right. Rock did make the move. However, he failed to look at the broader picture. He failed to realize he also made a lot of mistakes. But with Snaps' investment at risk, they made it clear to a young Kanan, Rock had to be dealt with. Now, Ronnie was never going to sit still and let Rock destroy his operation for a second time. His whole persona in the streets is being feared, and if he wasn't being feared, he wouldn't be respected. So we saw him sending his crew to hit Rock, an attempt which not only failed, but was the moment where Kanan decided Ronnie had to go. I'm sure we could tell that Kanan really didn't fear Ronnie, and he also may not have been seeing eye to eye with his mother, but one thing he made clear to Ronnie from day one was, he wasn't to fuck with his family. So when he made that call without consulting Kanan, it was only a matter of time before Kanan betrayed him, just like Tariq betrayed the older Kanan in Power. In Power, the older Kanan took a real liking to Tariq and dropped his guard around him, which eventually led to his downfall, and the same goes for Ronnie. Even though Kanan stepped to him the way he did, he still trusted his plan, which involved a fake kidnapping to get his business back as well as $500k in cash.
Shit's beach money.
Now, circling back around to the beginning of this video, I made reference to how there was a lot of chess moves being played this season, and what chess teaches you is that if you lose, at some point you made a mistake. It doesn't matter if it's the smallest of mistakes. If you took too long to make that specific move and time runs out, or in Ronnie's case, dropping your guard and trusting the wrong person like the older Kanan did in Power with Tariq, you will lose. You take 100% accountability because you fucked up. Unfortunately, when you're in the street and drug game, where the consequences could be paid with your life, it's game over. There are no second chances. So the minute he turned his back to Kanan, where we saw him smile for the first time this season, it was lights out. Now here's where we also learned about another mistake from Ronnie. He failed to execute Law 15 from the 48 Laws of Power, of crushing his enemy totally. Earlier on in this breakdown, I mentioned that Ronnie was someone who always tidied up after himself, even after committing some of the most heinous acts. Everything was always left in a tidy manner. However, the fact that the tailoring shop was said to be left in a huge heap of mess tells us that Unique's supposed kill went against his character, because the Ronnie we learned about always tidied up after himself. But with Unique returning, I'm sure he was pretty mad he wasn't able to get his revenge on his brother, because I'm sure he would have loved to have pulled the trigger. But with all of that being said, Ronnie Mathis may be gone from the storyline with Unique returning, but his impact will last for a very long time. I always make a point of how characters can make moves from beyond their graves, and Ronnie certainly falls into that category, so who knows how else he could have poisoned Kanan's mind, what else he told him about Rock, and so on. So I do think his presence will leave a long-lasting impact on one person in particular, Kanan Stark.